Mic check 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and in order to be a collector in 2025, you must be a reseller at the same time, or at least that's what John McDonald believes. And shout out to John McDonald. He is a content creator, and he recently posted a video on his channel talking about how he believes that in order to collect video games or retro games in 2025, you have to be a reseller to some degree. And I thought that that was a very interesting notion. And I thought, I wonder how true that is. Now, I'm not showing you this little stack of cash as any type of brag, but more so kind of as an example, because I spent a good chunk of my weekend, well, really not a good chunk, a small part of my weekend actually, doing some reselling myself. So I had a number of doubles in my collection, and I knew that there was going to be a kind of like a swap event happening at one of my local game stores. And so I decided to pop in with, a small box of games just to see how well I could do. And surprisingly enough, in about an hour, I walked away with about 850 bucks. Now, I wasn't really haggling too hard, and I was giving some pretty decent deals while I was there. I pretty much just, I pretty much went a little bit below price charting on the majority of the things. And if a person bought like a bulk amount of things, I gave them another percentage off. I didn't give the house away, I didn't give the store away, but I think I gave out some pretty fair deals. And with that, I was able to walk away with some cash. Now, I'm not using this cash to buy more video games. In fact, quite the opposite. I'm actually using this cash to buy a new drone. For those of you who don't know, there is pretty much a shortage on a lot of electronics. A lot of electronics have gone up. A lot of people, I think, feel like, it's just video games that have gone up, but everything from cameras to drones to anything that's coming from pretty much China overseas, there's going to be, increased prices. And in some cases, there's a shortage because some items, certain electronics are actually being banned and being held up at customs, and drones are actually one of them. They're being viewed as a potential threat to national security, and that's a whole nother road we can go down. I'm not going to go down that road in this video, but just saying that to say that the money that I made over the weekend isn't necessarily going to video games, it's going to something else. But if I were to, be in a position where I wanted to add some video games or add some retro games, taking, pieces of my collection that I don't really want, or taking extras that I may have gotten in a lot, and reselling them does make the hobby more affordable. And I think that's the standpoint that John was coming from in his video. I don't think he was trying to say that you have to be a reseller, but necessarily. But I think what he was trying to say was that in order for video game collecting or retro game collecting to be affordable to a degree, you have to be a reseller. And I kind of understand where he's coming from. If you were to go and try to buy 3 retro games that were at the level of a Super Metroid, which honestly, let's be honest, Super Metroid isn't like a rare game, right? And neither is it an obscure game. But for whatever reason, Super Metroid in 2025 costs around 70 bucks just for the loose cartridge, right? Maybe 60, 65 if you find a good deal. And so trying to just go and buy a loose copy of Super Metroid, whether you try to buy it online or at a game store, it's going to cost you around 70 bucks. So imagine if you try to go and buy, even if you just went and tried to buy 2 games at the level of a Super Metroid, that's $140 a week. Now you're talking, close to $600 a month. And you've only bought, what is that, 8 games in the month? And you could just, extrapolate from there based on how many games you actually want to buy. Now, granted, not everybody's trying to go and buy a copy of Super Metroid every day, but even if you're going out and you're buying a mix of retro games that range between 20 and, 80 bucks, and, if you're trying to add like 10 games to your collection per month or something like that, now it becomes very expensive. And I think it's very difficult, even for people who have the means to do it, even for people who have the money to spend. Do you want to do it? No. And so you're really trying to look for the path of least resistance when it comes to buying these things. And really the best way is going to yard sales, going about it the cheap route. Now the thing is, you can't control what you're going to find in the wild. Meaning, like, if you wake up in the morning and you say, like, man, today I want to find a copy of Mega Man X2, and you think you're going to find it game hunting, odds are you're not going to find that game while you're out game hunting. But what you will find probably is about 3 copies of Wii Sports. You might find, a few copies of, I don't know, Wind Waker. You might find a few N64 games. You might find other games that have value to them, but are not the game you're looking for. And if you're able to find these games at exceptionally low prices, well, wouldn't it make sense to either A, sell those games to get the money to buy Mega Man X2, or trade those games away to get Mega Man X2? That would probably be the most frugal, the most cost effective way to pick up a copy of Mega Man X2. And whether a lot of people are saying it or not, I think this is how some collectors are approaching the hobby, because it makes the most sense to them. Because, like I said, you can't control what you're going to find in the wild. And if you're someone who's been collecting for a long time, odds are you probably have the bulk of the games you want in your collection already. I know me personally, when I go out in the wild, a lot of the games that I see in the wild that I would pick up for purchase, I already have, so I pass them by. I'm like, I'm not going to buy that again. I already have that game in my collection. I don't need to buy it twice. And then the games that I really do want, those are games that I rarely ever see. I almost never see them in game stores, and I almost never see them, um, anywhere. I don't see those games where, outside of eBay. And so if I know that it's a game that I'm going to inevitably have to purchase online, my hunting strategy kind of changes, because now I'm not necessarily looking for games to add, but I'm looking for deals that I can use to flip to get the game that I really want. And is this a bad thing? Is it really a bad thing to try and collect this way? I'm really interested to know, because a lot of the retro gaming community feels like resellers messed the game up. They feel like resellers are the ones that really destroyed the hobby. And Mort from Mort's Garage, he put out a video that basically said, is it really the resellers' fault? Because resellers aren't the one paying the prices for the games. It's the people paying for the games that are causing the prices to stay high. Resellers could price their games at whatever they want, but it takes someone willing to buy that game at that price for the price and the value to hold. So who's really to blame? Is it the chicken? Is it the egg? Is it the tomato? Is it the tomato? It's a very interesting thought. And when I saw his video, I said, wow, that's actually really interesting to think about. It's interesting to think about, especially in 2025, when, you would have thought that there would have been a significant enough drop in retro game prices for it to be more affordable, but prices are holding. For the most part, they're holding pretty well. I saw a loose card copy of Chrono Trigger that was maybe in about a 7 out of 10 condition. The seller wanted $200 for it. And will he get that eventually? Maybe. But at the end of the day, um, I think, I think collectors are trying to figure this out. I think a lot of people thought that these prices would have tanked already, especially given the, where the economy's at. But they're not, because resellers refuse to budge, game stores refuse to drop their prices, and then individual collectors and individual sellers are refusing to really lower the prices significantly on certain games. Not all games, but on certain games, folks just refuse to budge, and they're well within their right to do that. But I kind of look at it like the housing market in a sense, right? Um, Everyone during that same time of, 2020, 2021, 2022, when people were snagging up retro games all over the place and getting them at cheap prices, via yard sales and, thrift stores, when it was easier to find these things, you had other people who were snapping up amazing interest rates on their home, right? People were getting interest rates that were historically low. I mean, you're talking 2.5, 2.6, 2.9. These were interest rates on a home purchase that were wild, right? And shortly after 2022, you started to see this crazy inflation in mortgage interest rates, and now they're hovering between 6.5 and 7%. And you know, when you're talking about 6.5 or 7% on a loan that's upwards of a $500,000, I don't know what the average price of a home is in America right now. I don't know if it's 300,000, 350,000. I don't know what it is, but I could tell you, like, if you're on the coast, if you're like in New York or California, get ready to cough up 800 grand or better. And when you're talking about the, interest rate on $800,000 going from, a 2.5 all the way up to 7% makes a huge difference. It can make your mortgage payment go from 3 grand to, I don't know, 42, $4,500, right? It's just crazy. And I mean, I'm not doing really any significant math. I'm just like, I'm spitballing these numbers, so don't hold me to them. I'm saying all this to say that if you're someone who locked in that interest rate and you bought that house, even if you want to sell that house today, you're not going to, because even if you found an even better house, you're thinking about the interest rate and you're like, well, I'm not going to be able to get another 2.8 interest rate again if I go buy a house. Even if the house that you want to buy is cheaper than the house you originally purchased, that interest rate is still going to cause your payment to be higher, assuming you put down the same percentage of a down payment. And so because of that, there's this like lock-in effect where people don't want to sell their homes because they're just not, they're afraid of the interest rates. And I think this is a big part of the reason why we don't see the prices of homes dropping, even though there's fewer and fewer people that actually have the ability to purchase their homes or purchase homes in general. I personally think if interest rates were to drop, you would see a lot more homes go up on the market for sale, and then this would overall cause home prices to drop. But they're kind of in a stranglehold, and I'm using that as an example, or kind of as an analogy, probably a very poor analogy, to kind of explain what's going on in the retro game market in terms of prices. You've got a lot of people who purchase these games either at really low prices, and they're, maybe they're trying to maximize how much they can get for them, or they think they're going to go up in the future, so they're holding on to these games, hoping that the prices, continue to increase. Or on the flip side of that coin, you have people who bought at the peak of the market. They probably paid, $700 for their copy of Klonoa, and now that Klonoa is only going for $400, which $400 is still a lot of money for a PlayStation 1 game. And I don't know. Again, I haven't checked the price of Klonoa complete in box on the PlayStation 1. My numbers could be wrong here too, but I'm just making a point that even if, even though the game is still probably really expensive to someone like you or me, to the person who paid the premium for it back in like 2020, they're not trying to take a $300 hit on a game that they paid $700 for, which is now only worth 400. So, and I think all of this kind of plays a factor in where people are in retro game collecting and video game pricing and the value of video games. Something significant needs to change in either people's perception of the economy or in the economy itself, right? People have to have a change in perspective and perception of where things are going for them to feel either free enough to let some of their games go, or hold on to their games. I think that's the big thing. Now you are going to have those people who are just ready to make a change in their life, and they really don't care about the values. If they have a collection that they're ready to sell, they're going to get rid of it. I recently saw Phoenix Resell did a video where he just bought a huge collection from I think his name is the Video Game Votary. I've joined a couple of his lives. Seems like a cool dude. He was a huge Nintendo collector, but this guy sold his entire Wii collection to Caleb. Sold his whole Wii collection to Caleb, basically at $18,000 to $20,000 collection, and he sold it to him for basically 9 grand. So 50% off. And I know he paid up for some of those games because some of those games were really expensive or really valuable. And it was a big collection. I remember I would see his Wii collection in his background. I'd be like, man, how many Wii games does this guy have? I didn't know he had the whole set. So, and he sold it, and now he's moving on to bigger and better things. Who knows what he's going to do with that 9 grand? Maybe he'll go to Thailand. Maybe he'll go to Japan. Maybe he'll buy a new car. Maybe he'll buy a house. Who knows? But I think you're always going to have the folks that you're going to have those one or two people who are just ready to make a change, and they're not. It doesn't matter what's going on in the overall market. They're just ready to do what they need to do. But I think for the everyday collector and for the everyday reseller, people are still out there looking for deals, and I think they're willing to bend a little bit. Um, People are willing to bend a little bit. But what I learned from going to this event where I sold a bunch of stuff is that a lot of the people who are willing to do deals are other probably resellers, people who are somehow involved in gaming, whether they have their own storefronts, whether they do their own kind of like buying and selling. I realized going to that event that I was doing more deals with resellers than anyone else, period. And the end user, people that I could tell weren't resellers, you could just kind of you can just tell by based on how they're making their purchase decision. They're a lot more slow to make their purchase decision. They got to think it over. They're crunching the numbers. They're looking up prices. They want to make sure that they're getting the best bang for their buck, and condition matters to them. It's a different sales process when you're selling to a reseller versus selling to just someone who's looking to buy the game and add it to their collection. And what I've seen is that there are more resellers selling to other resellers than, just resellers selling to end users at this point. And if you want to call me a reseller, that's fine. I guess technically I did that. That's where that money came from. I personally don't care. Um, because I think there is some credence, there is some truth to what John McDonald was saying with regards to collecting in the most frugal way. If you if you think that you earn some type of badge of honor for never reselling a game and buying all of your games at either market value or only buying games in at thrift stores and game hunting, then you can wear that badge of honor and be proud of yourself. But I don't think many people care. I don't care because not everybody's going to have the time to do that all the time. Like I said, I was able to go into this event, sell these games, and kind of walk away with, close to $1,000 in about an hour. Sometimes it just works out that way. It's not something I do all the time, and I feel okay with doing this because this was an event that was primarily made up of mostly other collectors looking to trade and stuff. And I almost did some trades and stuff like that, but I didn't get a chance to because I was on a time crunch. I wanted to get back home. One of my children are sick, so I really didn't have a lot of time to hang around and just chill. But just going back to John's point, I mean, I think that there is some truth to that. If you want to be able to get games and not break the bank, you might have to do a little reselling on the side. And in 2025, that might be okay. That might be okay. Not everybody's trying to be Phoenix Resale. Not everybody's trying to sell on Amazon. Not everybody's trying to, price gouge people or, do anything dishonest or anything like that. Some people just don't want to destroy their wallets, but they still want to collect the games that they want. And a lot of times the games that once you hit a certain point as a collector where you have a lot of what you actually want to add to your collection, you won't find it often in the wild. You just won't. Because when you're out hunting, you tend to see the same things over. You see the same games over and over again. You see the same GameCube games, the same 360 games. You see the same DS games, the 3DS games, same PlayStation 2 games. And for those of you who are actually out there hunting, you know what I'm talking about. You will see the same handful of games all the time. And it's rare that you'll actually find something that either you don't have that you actually want, or something that's really rare or just kind of like, wow, I don't normally see this. And usually people bite on things like that. I could be absolutely wrong in this train of thinking, but I'm really interested to hear from my community. You guys let me know what you think about this. How do you feel on this? Do you think that there's some truth to that? Do you think it's all malarkey and all you got to do is just game hunt for, spend every second that you're not eating and sleeping and showering and pooping game hunting? You guys let me know in the comments down below. And I will catch the members only in the video that I drop later on today. It's the Y2K Collector. You guys take it easy.